I would like to introduce our guest speaker, the Reverend Dr. Ewan Kelly. I was invited to a seminar a few months ago that Ewan was delivering, and I decided that it was just so interesting that I wanted to invite him to come and share what he has to say with all of us. Ewan is a rare breed, being Reverend Doctor. I work with a lot of Reverend Doctors, but they have doctorates in obscure things like systematic theology and ecclesiastical history. But Ewan is actually a real doctor, a medical doctor, as well as a Reverend. I think what Dr. Jason Leach said to us yesterday has kind of set a theme for us, and I'm sure that what Ewan's going to speak about will continue that theme. So you're very welcome, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much. Claire, I can tell by the buzz in the room and the difficulty that you had in shutting everybody up, that this is a troublesome bunch. Are you having a good time?
Yes.
Great. Well, I hope you'll have a good time for the next hour, and I hope that this can be as interactive as possible. You folks are at the heart of the well-being of our country. The greatest asset we have in Scotland is you and other human beings. That's the greatest asset that we have in our healthcare system, in our social care system, but just in our country. Folks who are willing to give of their time and their skills and their talents for the well-being of others. And in that way, keeping yourselves well. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. How relationships not only meet other people's needs, but they meet our needs. And we all need a reason to get up in the morning. And you folks help other people have a reason to get up in the morning, and that's part of what we're going to explore. But before all of that, I want to tell you that I recently got married for a second time. And I had 3 kids, and now I've got 6. And well, hey. And I'm a doctor, I should know better. But the biggest problem is actually got 4 legs, and he's called Flash, and he's an English pointer. And in my new wife's life, well, he's actually the real man of... Anyway, he's the man in the house. My kids are 21, my own kids are 21, 18 and 16, and they think their dad's a bit sad. And that's kind of normal, really. But they think I'm not sad, particularly because I've spent a lot of my life working in palliative care, and I've done a bit of research about grieving and funerals, and they don't particularly think I'm sad about that, or I spend a lot of time in the crematorium. They think I'm sad because I love Leonard Cohen. Absolutely. Why do I tell you all of that? Well, you see, before I'm program director and I'm a minister and I'm a doctor and all that stuff, I'm a human being. I'm a human being. And it doesn't really matter what letters I've got before my name or after my name. And that's what you folks, I think, are in the business of doing. Being human next to other humans. And that I think, for me, is the essence of healthcare. And the essence of what gives our lives meaning and purpose. And that's really my raison d'etre in the health service, is to actually, at the moment, Jason, who you met yesterday, who is at the head of this big programme, it's a bit sad, actually, that we're trying to rehumanise healthcare. That sounds a bit sad, but we've got so caught up in the technology and systems. But my raison d'etre is that the most precious gift we have is humanity. And how do we keep people human? And that's just another way of saying building resilience. And I guess this morning I want you to think too about your gifts, your abilities as a human being. But how do you stay human? How do you stay sane with all the things that you do and you're involved in? Because you can't be any use to anybody else if you don't look after yourself. I was brought up a good Presbyterian, and it wasn't until about maybe 10 years ago I thought the Bible, when it was growing up, said, love other people more than you love yourself. And of course that's pants. It's absolutely pants. Love your neighbour as you love yourself. And as Scots, we're not always very good at that. I don't know if you're good at that. But that's, again, part of what I want us to think about how we stay resilient, how we feel alive. And I'm going to try and make this as interactive as possible. But just to give you that's just a wee outline of who I am. Maybe I should just say a little bit more professionally. I did start off life as a junior doctor. I was far better at sitting on the bed than I was at dancing around it. And as a junior doctor, that's what I literally did. I stuck things in people and I listened to people's chests, not to what they said. And I discovered actually I was far better at sitting on the bed. And the world is a lot safer that I no longer work as a doctor. But then I did some theology, and then I got ordained as a Church of Scotland minister, and I worked in a couple of parishes in Leith, which was very hard, if you know Edinburgh, very hard for me as a Hearts reporter working in Leith, and in Curry. And then I went to healthcare chaplaincy, so I worked in the Southern General, which, boy, does anybody from Glasgow? Oh, good man. The size of that place, it's enormous now. And then I went to work in Edinburgh. Oh. I noticed you're sitting on the other side of the room. And then I went to work in a hospice in Edinburgh. And throughout that, I've had the opportunity to work in university at Edinburgh and a bit in Glasgow too, teaching students bad habits, which has been great. And I have this job now which is about the development of something called spiritual care, which we'll explore. But really that's about promoting humanity and meaning and purpose in life. So that's really who I am. Who are you? I've got a list. I've had a list of the organisations you represent, but do you mind shouting out what kind of roles do you perform in those organisations? What kind of mischief do you get up to? What do you do with yourselves? What sort of things? Go on. Buddy, brilliant. So it's relating, it's human relationships again, it's friendships, brilliant. Fashion shows, hey, brilliant. Yeah? Support. Empathy. Socialising, absolutely. Have fun. Fundraising. Listening. Yeah. Yep. Caring. Sorry. Collecting. Connecting. Yeah, absolutely. Cuddles, yeah.
I was going to say loving, but I don't know what to say.
And that's brilliant that that's a man. What's your name, sir?
Alan.
Alan, that's fantastic. No, seriously, it usually takes a Scots male 5 pints before he says that. No, that's wonderful. Because absolutely, sometimes, I mean, that's a word that we don't use in our health service. And yet that's what basically it comes down to. Loving folk. Absolutely. And sometimes sometimes the most profound thing you can do is give somebody a cuddle. And it's difficult sometimes too, though. It's knowing when the right time. And that for me is what this is about as well. It's because what we do is we don't just care with our heads or our hearts, we also care with our guts. That thing about discerning, going with our gut. When's the right time to reach out and touch? When's the right time just to say nothing? And as a minister, I find that quite hard. But that's a fantastic gift, I think. Maybe one of the biggest problems or challenges for us as a society, apart from, well, there's poverty and injustice, inequity, but there's loneliness and isolation. And I don't know if you find that in your communities. Maybe that's not an issue in your community, but I think especially if you're living with cancer, that can be a huge issue. Because you can be lonely in a crowd, lonely in a family. So thank you for that. It just gives me a wee idea of the kind of things that, I was going to say do, but you're also being. You're not just doing, you're being, which is, I think, very profound. So we're going to talk about spiritual need. Now, don't be put off if that word, you kind of think, oh dear, what's this going to be about? I guess I'd like to dispel a few myths about that. I'm going to talk about values, why we do what we do, and how these things contribute greatly to our humanity and keeping well. This was one of the most important books I've ever read. This guy, Michael Wilson, was a psychiatrist and a chaplain. And he wrote a book in the early 70s. And he basically talked about hospitals at that time, but what he meant was healthcare was a place of truth. It was a place where we not only learn to care for other people, but we learn to be human. Now, I don't know what that maybe means for you, but for me, the great thing about caring, about listening, about connecting, about cuddling, about loving, is there's not just the opportunity to care for another person, there's an opportunity for both of us to grow. Not just grow in relationships, but to learn about who we are. Let me tell you a story. When I started work in the Southern General in my late 20s as a chaplain, I was even more green round the ears. And I was working in sunny Govan, sunny Govan. And I got asked if I would go along and help facilitate a wee group for folks who'd had an amputation. It was the physiotherapist asked me to go along and to come along at coffee time in the morning and to meet the folks so that we could have a blether and maybe do some connecting and listening. So I went down in fear and trepidation, wondering what they would make of me. Went down and we were having a coffee and we're sitting round in a circle. And this bloke had just come out, he'd been to the toilet, and in those days the common thing to go to the toilet was to go for a fag, and he'd come back and had his fag, sat and he was in his chair, in his wheelchair, and he said, "Aye, chaplain, does that mean you're a minister?" And I said, "Yes." He says, "Well, what does that mean? Does it mean you like have services and things like that?" And I said, "Yes." He says, "Is that for Proddies or is it for Catholics?" We're talking about govern here, folks, and I said, "Well, it doesn't really matter. They're for everybody, no matter what fit you kick with." And he looked down at where both his legs should have been. And said, "Well, son, that's no much good for me, is it?" And you know, a month later, I got invited to my first Women's Guild talk. And I told that story. And half the folk laughed, and the other half, ladies, didn't laugh. And at tea time, I said, "Did I say something wrong?" And they said to me, "Well, you do know that our minister's got a wooden leg." What keeps you resilient? Laughter. What do you get from the people that you work with? Very often, and even in the most awful circumstances, is laughter. And what I learned from that bloke was, boy, if you're going to survive in the Southern General as a chaplain, you've got to have a sense of humour. And you've actually got to be able to laugh at yourself too, and not take yourself too seriously. Part of the transformation of being in human relationships, learning about yourself and how you can relate, and how not to relate. But actually, you know, it's one of these things, I put my big foot in it, but actually it was the best thing that could happen, because we all laughed. I wished the ground would open up, but then I was just Ewan, who was a bit of an Egypt, rather than the chaplain. In healthcare, over the last 30 years, what we've majored in is teaching people to be parachute packers. Whether you're a doctor, whether you're a nurse, or whether you're a chaplain. Now, what do I mean by that? Is that if you're a parachute packer, you've got to be very precise in packing every parachute the same way and doing consistently and safely so it's going to open. So what we've majored in is teaching doctors and nurses to treat people safely, effectively, and consistently. But what we've not majored in is how we use our humanity, how we use our heads, how we use our hearts, and how we use our discernment. And in fact, what our system does in healthcare, unfortunately, is actually it dehumanises people. And I don't know if you've got any family or friends that work in healthcare. It can be a rough place to work. And maybe for you at times you get a glimpse of that. But again, the greatest resource that we have is not just the skills that we learn, not just the techniques, but actually the compassion that we have, that human element. So in Scotland, you know, we're at the forefront of technical brilliance. I mean, you know, we can get liver transplant, kidney transplant, the advancements in cancer treatment. Don't get me wrong, they're all so important. But we've become so focused on the technology that we've become in danger of the human stuff. And actually, it's not just what we do to people, it's how we do it. And you can go to all the communication classes you like and learn all the skills and techniques, but if you ain't got that natural warmth and ability to love and to cuddle and to come out from behind the arm. Now, you can't do that all the time. You can't come from behind the arm. Sometimes you're having a bad day and you just can't do it, and that's fine. But again, it's how do we help keep healthcare professionals, how do we help keep yourselves human so that you can keep caring and keep enjoying caring? So this is the part that's been myself and my colleagues' work in the health service about promoting spiritual needs, the need for meaning and purpose, the need to be loved and to love. And in the hospice, we'd see that very clearly, right up to people's last seconds, that they needed not only to be loved, but there were still somebody's mammy, or grandmammy, or daughter that they still needed to love. We all need sources of hope and strength. Trust is a huge thing. And we all need to express our beliefs, whether they're religious or not. We all have beliefs and our values. We need to be creative and to be able to perform spiritual practices. Now, that's not just prayers or going to church or mosque, but we're also talking about other things that how people find meaning and purpose in their lives. And what we're going to do now is think about that, and I'd like you to turn to your neighbour and just consider what gets you out of bed in the morning. Now, some joker usually says the alarm clock. And if you're a middle-aged man, somebody usually says their prostate. But what is it? What keeps you going in life? What makes life worth living for you? What makes you feel alive? What makes you feel alive? What makes you feel alive? My middle son started university this week, and we took him there, and it was in some ways a sad day, and it made me feel crikey. What age am I now? But I just felt so proud of him. Felt alive, giving him a cuddle and wishing him well. So have a conversation in your life. What gets you out of bed in the morning? What raises your spirits? What resources do you rely on when the chips are down? And what makes you feel alive? So for 5 minutes, have a chat about that. Brilliant, what a noise. Fantastic. No, seriously, it's fantastic that there's so much energy around. Seriously, it's great for me to come and be in a place where people are energised and engaging and having fun. It's not like that across the health service in some places. Seriously, that's an issue that we're going to talk a wee bit about. So, fantastic. I guess I want you to hear that you bring something really special to what we're doing in supporting people across Scotland. Just that energy and that warmth that's in the room is brilliant. Anyway, what sort of things were you talking about? What sort of things were you talking about? Family, yeah, special people, absolutely. What is it about family that's special? Love, yeah. Just people that love you no matter what. Yeah, you know, when you are an idiot, they still love you. Yeah, absolutely. That's such an important thing. Anything else? Friends. Yes, friends. Similarly, again, people that will do anything for you, drop things do things for you at the drop of a hat. Absolutely. So it's not just what you do with friends. It's that relationship. We all have different needs, and it doesn't matter what gender or sex we are. We have different needs, and it's finding different ways of supporting people. And if that works for blokes in your context and within that culture, that's brilliant. And if it's different somewhere else, and You folks will have, I'm sure, will have worked out what's best in finding ways of supports in your local communities. And I think that's really important. Because sometimes what we do in healthcare is we do one size fits all. And that's the fantastic thing about the voluntary sector. And that's what we've got so much to learn from you. When I say we, I mean statutory services. And all right, we're in this big machine. But the way that you personalise care, we're talking about person-centred care. The way you personalise care is we can learn so much. And that's what I believe, because you actually listen to people and what they need and what they want through your connecting, through your relationships. So what am I saying there? What I'm saying is, what gives you meaning and purpose, the insight you have in your family and friends and the relationship you have, that's part of the gift, part of the asset that you take into your voluntary roles. Does that make sense? And maybe we just do that without thinking, but I think it's something about the experience that you have had in life and are having is a gift to other people. And we'll talk a bit more about that. But what other things did you talk about? We talked about family, friends, love of life. Fantastic. So that's an attitude and an approach. Yeah.
New experiences.
New experiences, brilliant. Yeah. Travel.
Travel, yeah, and in fact, not necessarily going all that very far. My wife and I have been discovering recently an awful lot of new things and places to go within 10 miles of our own back door.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Absolutely. Life's an adventure. And it's interesting too. I think one of the things that I've learned from working in, especially in palliative care, is that life, it sounds obvious, it has a beginning and an end, and that actually gives it meaning, because it's what you do in between that counts. And that's a fantastic way of living life. Yeah. Anything else you'd like to?
Appreciation of the world about you. You're open air, fresh
Yeah.
air.
Absolutely.
Outside,
Yeah.
doors,
Yeah.
beaches,
Which part of the world are you from?
Banshire.
Absolutely. One way of thinking about this whole thing is that what's meaningful, or what gives us hope and strength, there's things within us. So there's memories, there's values, there's love, there's things between us, so there's relationships, and there's things beyond us. And that's what I think you're talking about, is that connection with nature. We're coming into autumn and the beautiful colours up your neck of the woods. The stars. I'm going down this weekend down to Dumfries and Galloway and looking forward. I hope we get a clear night, because it's supposed to be one of these places where you can see the stars. So connections, and whether that's connections with another, whether that's part of your belief system, but also part of the natural world. So thank you for that. Yeah, seeing the sunshine in the morning. Anything else that we've not talked about?
Being part of the community.
Sorry?
Being needed.
Being needed. Fantastic. I think that's such an important thing, that we feel needed, that we've got something to contribute, something to make a difference. Absolutely. And again, in the palliative care setting, that was something I really learned, that people, again, right up to the end, even though they were feeling very helpless and sometimes a burden, that they felt needed, that they could still contribute something and give something back. Somebody said something else. There was other things that were great. Part of a community. Brilliant. So much of our identity is not just about the way we were brought up in our family and our relationships. It's the community story and how that shapes and forms us. And the dance that we dance in our own particular community, with its own particular history and stories and idiosyncrasies and joys and disappointments. And you yourselves are a community. You yourselves coming together as a community, and there's a great strength in that you've got friends and colleagues, not just in Orkney, but in Banff and Glasgow and Edinburgh, who have common interests, and there's common bonds there. In healthcare at the moment, we're talking about assets. We talk about, and these are fantastic assets that you have in your lives and you bring to your communities and bring to other people's lives. In healthcare, what we've tended to do is to focus on deficit. So what we've tried to do is to fix you or fix me when we're unwell. And actually most things we can't fix. Most things we can't fix. We can cure some things, we can alleviate the pain, but we can always care. And the way we care is using our assets. So it's about you folks using these assets that you've talked about and helping other people to use their assets. The assets inside them, the assets around about them, and for some people, the assets beyond them. And that's the stuff, the meat and drink of the stuff, I believe, my understanding is of what you do through your connections, through your loving, through your caring, through having a blether. You're allowing people to be themselves and to get in touch with this stuff. And spiritual's just one word for it. You can call it what you want, but that's one word we use. Okay, this is another thing that I think gives us tremendous resilience, and that's the things that motivate us. The things that motivate us. Our values. So what I want you to consider is again, just having a wee chat with you. Is this okay to do this again? Just to chat with your neighbour. What brought you into volunteering? What was it? What motivated you? And you maybe you know that already, I don't know. But have a wee conversation, again, just for 5 minutes, if you don't mind. That would be great.
We spoke about, if we're absolutely honest, and I feel it as well, sometimes there's a selfishness, because I know if I help somebody get that successful, I get a buzz out of it. I get someone's back, and I'm quite open and honest with people. People say, why do you do it? I do it because I get something back. And that keeps the ball, if you like, so it goes into who, what, why, and...
Brilliant. And I think that's superb, because I think when we're all honest, we all have that need. And I think the key thing is you're aware of it. Absolutely. I think when you're aware of it, because one of the key questions that we're going to look at in a minute, that we're trying to get healthcare professionals to think about in decision making, especially end of life, is whose need is being met. And it's when somebody wonderful like yourself, and you hear people, the ripple, people got that, absolutely. When you realise, I had to ask myself, why did I go into a profession where all the people I was working with were sick? Whose need was being met by that? So asking that question I think is crucial, because it keeps it all in perspective, because we all need to have a need to give, and that's really healthy. But if that's the whole raison d'etre, if that's what it's all about, and then does it come about me working out my stuff with another person rather than us working together? So I think if you hold on to that, that's fantastic. That's really powerful. I just want to say thank you for sharing some of that personal stuff. It's incredibly powerful. And that's the sort of stuff that keeps us well. And we had a lovely example from our young friend there. That's what helped him get well quicker. His understanding of that. And it gives us a reason to get up in the morning. And for example, you know, many of my colleagues who have a dog collar on, they find it very difficult when they retire, because their whole identity is tied up with their job. So what do? What gets you up in the morning when you retire, for example? And these are wonderful examples of finding a way of taking that innate caring and fulfilling our need while helping to fulfill others' needs. These are really important issues that we're talking about. They're kind of fundamental. Because all the research shows is that if we can create an environment, like a family environment or an environment in Clan and Orkney, or wherever you're working in Edinburgh, what you're doing, if we can create an environment where people can work, live out our core values, so if we can encourage people to fulfill that innate need, to respond to fill gaps out of our own experience, it helps us to get up in the morning, and it keeps us well, and it makes us feel alive. It makes us feel alive, and that's really special. It's giving other people glimpses of humanity. That's a wonderful phrase. Gives us hope, gives us resilience, and also it's when we have a lot of fun. Because I bet you folks have a lot of fun as well as share some hard stuff as well. And this is just another, this is sort of work stuff, but if people in a work environment or a volunteering environment are able to live out their core values, to use their assets, then it's a win-win. It's a win-win. In healthcare chaplaincy, really what we're trying to do is to explore, really do what we were doing this morning. Think about how we can help keep people healthy and human by getting them in touch with what gives them meaning and purpose and their values. And we're not just focusing on individuals, but we're trying in a small way to influence systems and communities. And I just want to tell you a little bit about what we're doing. This is the traditional way that we used to do healthcare chaplaincy, and we still do, and it's still important, and that is caring for people who are in distress. Now, I'm sorry, it's a bit fuzzy, but do you know Calvin and Hobbes? Calvin is a 6-year-old American boy, and his best pal is a stuffed tiger who comes to life in his imagination. And the pair of them have found this baby raccoon, and the poor wee baby raccoon's got knocked over and has died. And the wee boy's in his bed at night, and he says to his pal, you know, Hobbes, I can't figure out this death stuff. Why did that little raccoon have to die? He didn't do any wrong. So the why questions, and I'm sure all of us at some point in our life have had the why questions. And now he's having a good rant. He was just little. What's the point of putting him here and taking him back so soon? And in the last picture, they're both underneath the bed. And all the wee boy says, it's either mean or it's arbitrary, and either way I've got the heebie-jeebies. So there's no magic answers to these why questions. And all his pal, all his befriender, all his spiritual carer, his nurse that's about to retire says, why is it always night when we talk about these things? So this was our traditional model about making a safe space for people to express themselves as they needed to, and to ask the questions that have no answers, and to be angry and to vent. And the carer, you know, we know what that's like. That's draining. It's not easy to do. But what we've decided to do is to take that kind of model, but translate it into groups for staff. So what we've done is we've taken 3 of the priorities that the government are working on at the moment, and we've developed national programs around them. And that's about helping to keep staff well and helping to work with people in communities who go to see their GPs. And we're trying not to call them patients. What's the difference between a patient and a person? Absolutely. Absolutely. A patient tends to be made up of bits of what's wrong with you, and when I say bits, sections of you, rather than a whole person. So we're trying to work with persons in GP surgeries to keep them well. So a couple of projects that I'm just going to finish with very quickly. So the whole idea of this values-based reflective practice is to help, what we did this morning is to help health and social care staff provide the care that it came into the service to provide, to get back in touch with that core question. Because what we think happens is that when you go into a health service that's busy, that's all about doing to and doing it quickly, you lose sight of that. You lose sight of that, and it becomes very difficult to hold on to it. So we're trying to help people reconnect with their core values to do this. And what we've done is we've trained chaplains to create a space for staff from different disciplines to tell a story of an encounter with a patient or a meeting or a telephone call. And the way that their colleagues have to respond is that they notice and wonder. So I noticed when I gave you lot the opportunity to talk, you certainly did, and I wondered why. And I noticed when I was announced as Reverend Doctor, half of you went to sleep and the other, well, and I wondered why. So the idea is that people are telling the story of an encounter without being judged. And without somebody else saying, well, you should have done that, or I would have done this. Or, even worse, trying to fix it. So we're giving people a space to tell a story of what happened, but also the feelings around it and the meaning around it. So, usually when things go wrong in the health service, we do something called a critical incident debrief. And we ask the question, what went well, what went wrong, and how can we do it differently? Now that's important, but we don't tend to ask these questions. Whose need was met during the encounter? What does the experience tell me about my caring ability? What does it tell me about me? And importantly, what does it say about my values that inform my attitudes and behaviours? So, who had the power? Whose voice was heard? Whose voice was valued? It may have been listened to, but was it really heard? So it's really, in a safe environment, trying to get practitioners or managers to ask some quite hard questions and to take that into their future practice, not just to inform their practice, but their future well-being. And what we found when we evaluated that with chaplains, we found that they felt it deepened their practice, that it deepened team relationships, and it helped re-motivate them. It helped them to want to get up out of bed on a Monday morning. So they were saying things like, it's not only become a practice, it's become a way of doing the job, but a way of being. It's deepened the level of trust within the team. It's reinvigorated my work and my relationships with my colleagues, increased my sense of well-being, and increased my sense of motivation. So here's an example, and I don't want to get too technical about it. This is a renal physician, a kidney doctor, who is a very experienced doctor, and he shared this case study in front of 50 of his colleagues. A lady was admitted into hospital in her mid-80s, and she'd always said that she didn't want to have dialysis. Even though she got very ill, she'd always say she didn't want to have that. But she came into hospital and she was quite breathless, and the mid-grade doctor who clerked her in, between the two of them, they agreed that she should have dialysis. So the mid-grade doctor phoned up the senior doctor who agreed. And what that meant was that a big central line had to go into this lady's neck. So it was a very uncomfortable procedure that she had to go through. And the mid-grade doctor couldn't do it. So 20 minutes later, the senior colleague had to go in. And he could see the look on the nurse's face when he went in. And he had doubts, but he went ahead and did it. 12 hours later, that lady died. And she died very peacefully. But whose need was being met by that intervention? That consultant was able to share that with his colleagues and was able to work through not only to inform future practice, but to explore the feelings of the different folks involved. So, what he now does with his team, his whole team, is when they're discussing with a family, should they intervene, the whole team asks the question, whose need is being met? And in the same hospital, they now teach medical students with patients and ask the medical students after the interaction to notice and to wonder. To notice and to wonder. That's just one way of saying that this method has been integrated into government policy. And it's being looked at to see if we integrate it into a policy around palliative care in primary care settings and community settings. The idea of whose need is being met. The last thing, have I got a minute, or will I just stop now? 1 minute, okay. You can't shut a minister up. What we've done is we've put chaplains into GP surgeries, and these are services that are being offered when patients are asking why questions. Why me? Why now? When they're wrestling with a diagnosis or they're wrestling with a chronic long-term condition, and they lose the function, maybe of their legs or an ability to walk, and they're struggling then with the issue of losing their role as a carer or going to work, and then asking questions of their identity. I don't know who I am anymore. Now, these are normal questions. They're not questions that need to go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist. It's going back to Calvin and Hobbes. So what we found is that when people are dealing with loss and transition and they have a couple of 50-minute sessions with a chaplain, it's increasing patients' confidence to self-manage, to make decisions for themselves. It's normalising some of the feelings that they might have around loss and bereavement. It's making them feel, I'm no crazy, I'm not the only one that feels like this. It's much of the same work in some respects that you may be doing. What we're finding, it's reducing GP consulting time, and it's changing prescribing patterns. It's focusing the way that GPs use antidepressants, for example. The next step in this programme, which is taking place across Scotland, is to train a small number of volunteers to work with the GPs and to work with the chaplain. So the chaplain would maybe deal with the more complex issues, but there's a listening service there that can focus on why questions that can be provided, and we can, again, complement and do the kind of stuff that you're doing in different parts of the country. I've overrun. Thank you very much. You've been very patient.
Okay, just before we start the speed networking session, I don't want to make you late for that, because it's speed networking. I would just like to say a massive thank you to you, and I think that's been one of the best and most uplifting speeches ever. I've got loads of notes. What was really interesting was when he asked you to talk to each other. My God, the noise level just rose, and I was sitting there overjoyed. It was a truly beautiful sound. It was like birdsong. Seriously, it was.
Steady on.
It was. No, I thought so. I'm so glad we've got it on tape. I think we'll watch that speech again and again and again. So many key words in there. Please join with me once again, giving a massive thank you to you. Thank you.